All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to AI Ethics and Uses, presented by the Laconia Programs Outreach and Promotion section, also known as POP. My name is Lisa Moe. I'm the Adult Services Manager at the Three Rivers Public Library District in Channahon and Minooka, and a past president of the POP section. We have a great program lined up for you today with 3 presentations discussing various issues related to artificial intelligence. We are recording and we'll send the link out to all registrants as well as post it on the Laconia YouTube page within the next few days. We are going to hold all questions to the end of the program. Please put your questions in the Q&A box and we will do our best to get to all of them after our final presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to Marla to introduce our first presenters. Marla?
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marla Spagarin. I am the Adult Services Manager at the McHenry Public Library and the current treasurer for the Laconia POP Board. I'm pleased today to introduce our first speakers, Emily Wieshuber and Mark Daniel, who are going to speak on the definition of AI and some of its uses. Emily is a technology instructor at the Naperville Public Library and has been there for 4 years. She previously held roles with the Chicago Park District and as an elementary school teacher. She enjoys reading realistic fiction and romance. Mark is also a technology instructor at the Naperville Public Library. In 2015, Mark retired from consulting and business development work within the media and entertainment industry, and now works part-time teaching classes in video editing, audio work, photo restoration, and more. He also leads the library's Senior Tech Club, which helps seniors understand the technology that they face every day. The Senior Tech Club has over 90 active members and meets in 2 of their 3 libraries each month. Emily and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I assume you can hear us. Let me share the screen here. So you don't have to advance.
Sorry.
You're up.
All right. Let's rock and roll. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to present to you this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is AI. And in its broadest concept, encompassing the creation of intelligent machines that can perform tasks typically requiring human intelligence. It's a catch-all term that is sprawling. You can think of it as a continent. Machine learning is a subset of AI that focuses on algorithms, allowing computers to learn from and make predictions based on data. You can think of it as a country within a continent, still large and covering many types of automated algorithms that learn to model functions and predict future actions from data. A good example of this would be, I imagine there are many of you who shop on Amazon. And how many people might buy more than they should off of Amazon? Well, I'm certainly one of those people. And this may be in part due to Amazon's product recommendation system. It's a great example of machine learning. And here's how it works. It collects data and recognizes patterns. Then it compares your patterns with those of other users who have similar interests and purchasing habits. Based on these analyses, the algorithm predicts which products you're likely to be interested in. These predictions are then used to display personalized product recommendations on your Amazon homepage, product pages, and in email marketing campaigns. This machine learning powered recommendation system is highly effective, accounting for over 35% of Amazon's revenue. We'll move on to deep learning, which is a specialized form of machine learning that uses neural networks to pass data through many processing layers to interpret data features and relationships. You can think of it as a large city. And I imagine there are many of you who can use Face ID to unlock your phones. And this is a great example of deep learning in everyday life. The facial recognition systems use deep learning algorithms to detect faces and images in video, analyze facial features and contours, compare patterns to a database of known faces, and identify or verify individuals, like your phone does with Face ID. What AI isn't? Non-adaptive systems, single-purpose tools, human-controlled systems, and simple chatbots. Anything that is an if-then logic tree, anything that responds immediately based off of what your query or chat is, that doesn't require any thinking on the part of AI, it isn't AI. All right, we're going to talk about some AI that you're going to find in everyday life. Many of us have the opportunity to use different devices such as Alexa, Siri, or Google Assistant. And this AI uses speech recognition, which converts spoken language into text. It uses natural language processing, which is a subset of machine learning. It enables understanding, interpretation, and generation of human language. Why use it? Well, it's hands-free. It's quick access to information. You can play audiobooks, music, podcasts, and they're great to use as timers, especially in the kitchen. Both Siri and Alexa can learn user preferences over time, and they excel in integrating with a wide range of smart home devices. And they also provide supports for seniors and individuals with disabilities. We also see AI in fraud detection systems. Machine learning is used to detect fraud in banking, finance, e-commerce, retail, insurance, and healthcare. AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data to establish baselines of normal behavior and transaction patterns. This enables the system to quickly identify anomalies or deviations that may indicate fraudulent activity. For example, multiple transactions from the same device. For example, when a person has numerous $5 charges at a library copy machine, or purchases made from different locations in a short time frame, so customers can be contacted to verify their purchase of 16 refrigerators in Atlanta. We also see AI in navigation apps. Mapping services like Google Maps use AI to continuously monitor traffic, weather, and road conditions to present a route that has the fewest delays, allowing the driver to arrive sooner than taking a direct route. So when you respond to your message in your Google Maps that says, "There is an object in the road, is it still there?" your notification is helping to teach Google Maps. We also see AI in entertainment. I know many of us are moving over to streaming services, and this is one of the most prominent uses of AI in entertainment. It's used to enhance the viewer's experience by detecting credits and offering the option to bypass, to translate content to different markets, generate captions, subtitles, and audio descriptions, making content more accessible to all viewers, and of course, making those personalized content recommendations. I really wish I could get off some of those personalized content recommendations. We also see this in smart home devices. AI allows smart home to respond to voice commands such as raise the temperature in the house by 2 degrees, or turn on the living room lights, AI can monitor sensors in the home to alert the owner to intrusions, fire, or flooding. AI is also used in search engines. Now, while Google dominates the market with 91% of the share, Bing, which is Microsoft's search engine, is second in place with 3.7%, followed by DuckDuckGo and Yahoo. Why? Well, its large market share creates a self-reinforcing cycle, keeping it at the head of the pack. But how did it get there? Well, it's because Google is continuously integrating innovative AI technologies into its search engine. This allows to better understand natural language queries, provide more accurate results that meet users' needs. We also see AI in online shopping. It can analyze vast amounts of customer data, including purchase history, browsing behavior, and preferences to create personalized recommendations and make more accurate results. It allows retailers to optimize inventory management, supply chains, and adjust prices in real time based on demand. So in a way, it both benefits the consumer as well as the retailer. All right, and we also see AI in email and messaging. Predictive text, spam detection, send time optimization, which is basically when your email says, would you like to send this at a time when more people will be in the office? And autocorrect, my nemesis, are four of several of the ways AI is used in email and messaging. I know for myself, there have been a number of things that have auto-corrected. So when I sent my husband my Wendy's order, he said, you want a naked potato? And I said, no, I want a baked potato. AI thought it knew what I wanted. We're also going to see AI in a number of other arenas. Medicine and medical research is using this in such arenas as radiology, epidemiology, dermatology, as well as pharmaceutical development. We also see it in content creation, which I will be brief about, as Mark will speak more about that in future slides. But it allows the everyday person like you and I to go out and create content in a way we never were able to before. We also see it in entertainment, as we talked a little bit about prior. And we'll talk a little bit about the industrial uses of AI. Well, we've talked about seeing it in finance, banking, e-commerce, retail, insurance, and healthcare. And this is because those algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data to establish baselines of normal behavior. It enables the system to quickly identify anomalies or deviations that may indicate fraudulent activity. We'll see it in online shopping, as well as medical research and entertainment.
Okay, so we're going to go a little bit deeper on some of these. Let's talk about the personal uses of AI, because this is what you've seen in the past. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so my audio is cut out for some reason. Virtual assistants, we've already talked about those. You've all used something, either Google Assistant, Siri, or Alexa. And what's nice about this is it responds to voice commands, as opposed to typing out a lengthy question. These assistants don't always reply well to people with accents, so you have to be careful. If some of your patrons have thick accents, they may not be able to use this and they'll be frustrated by that, so you can let them know that that's being developed at this time to help them out. It also allows the elderly or disabled people to live much more independently, and we'll talk about that when we get to some of the other topics. Navigation is much more than finding the quickest route to the location you're going to. AI, in this case, Google Maps uses AI to monitor the traffic conditions, anything that's going on with the weather, roads closed, and that type of thing, to give you a route that's got the fewest delays, which allows the driver to arrive sooner, even if it's not taking a direct route. Smart home automation, again, I'll go into this a little bit deeper, but there's all sorts of things that you can do with smart home automation. And some of this stuff has been around for a while, but again, AI is helping the assistant to interpret what you asked for. So as opposed to saying, activate the heat in my house using the thermostat and set the temperature at 68. If it eventually knows that you like 68, you just say, hey, Google, turn on the heat, and it'll do it and set everything you want to. AI enhanced search. This is something that you're starting to see, especially in Google, that if you asked for a specific topic, you would get hundreds of thousands of links that you could go to. And who can go through hundreds of thousands of links? No one can. So what they do now is they use Gemini, which is their name for their AI, to give you a summary of what it suspects is the information that you're looking for. And you can read the summary, and then the links are still there. It's just that you may never even go to those links anymore because you may have gotten your answer from the AI. Email and messaging. Those of you who use Google Messaging now, you'll find that there's a lot of protective systems in place that will put an alert on for suspected spam texts. Of course, you've always got the autocorrect and things like that, but it's trying to find a way to make your experience with texting and messaging and email much better and much less harassing, if you will. There are quite a few issues regarding AI, and you're going to hear this from a lot of your patrons and the rest of that, and you should be ready for some of these. Remember that AI is still an experiment. Some experiments succeed, some of them fail. AI will eventually succeed regardless. It's never going to disappear. So it will be there for you, but it may be in a totally different format than you've got today. Students have been using AI to complete school assignments. As when they say, write an essay on such and such, they'll use the AI to write the such and such text or the essay. And then what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll modify it slightly, depending on how adventurous and how interested they are in a real education. There are tools that are being produced now that will try and catch a lot of that, but every time they produce one of those tools, the kids find a way and the AI finds a way to circumvent it. So it's going to be an ongoing problem for a lot of teachers. A lot of rogue nations and political entities are using AI to create and spread falsehoods. You'll see a lot of misinformation, which I know they're going to go too deeper in that. And also they're using this to create fake postings for Facebook or on X or whatever else is out there. And the other thing is that some AI models work better than others. Some are still not giving the correct answers. Some of these AIs that are still being developed will, as they say, hallucinate. So it'll give you an answer that sounds reasonable, but really isn't true. And right now, AI requires an immense amount of investment, billions and billions of dollars, and power generation. You all have probably read about how, I think it's Google that is going to reactivate one of the nuclear reactors on 3 Mile Island and build a big data center next to it so they can advance their AIs. This is a problem that we are not going to solve anytime soon, but it's one of the things that will slow down AI development over time. As a library, you probably want to make presentations to your patrons on these types of things. And there's some tools out there that you can use, tools that we've used here in Naperville that have helped out tremendously. We use Photoshop in here to demonstrate how you can restore old photos, the top photo being taken in 1981, and then the bottom photo shows what it can do with Photoshop. You can restore almost all of the color, you can bring up some sharpness, that type of thing, especially if you can find the old negatives from it. Google Photos also has some of these tools. Photoshop has a new tool out called Remove Distractions. So if you had a picture with some, say, hanging wires behind you, the AI will assume that that's what you want to get rid of, and it'll highlight it and say, do you want to get rid of this? You say yes, you hit delete, and it's gone. So the AI is trying to make these processes, some of them have been around for years, but trying to make them easier for everybody to use. I also read yesterday that Apple announced that within Apple Intelligence, they're also adding this same type of removal tool. You can use all sorts of tools out there to create virtual videos. And this is what's happening with a lot of people who create, say, misinformation or that type of thing. But it's fun. We, in our senior tech club, we let the seniors produce their own videos for this type of thing. And I'll give you an example. This is a fake video that we created, told it, I wanted George Washington to say something. So what does he say here? Let's see if I can get him to run.
That dollar I threw across the Potomac River, can someone give that back to me? I'm a little short on cash.
So you can have all sorts of fun with this. And again, it takes the scary out of this whole process for your patrons. There's also a tool called Suno that you can use that can help people create virtual music. In other words, AI created music. It's very simple to use. You can go on there and you can pick the kind of song you want to create. Say, let's say a reggae song about maybe the topic is how to tie your shoes. Put it in there, give it a minute, and it comes up with an original AI song. Granted, they're not that good, but they're original. So you can, again, have fun with some of your the teens, or you can have some of the seniors or whoever else you want to, and show them it's not as scary as you expect, and it isn't really all that good yet. So it's not going to throw a lot of people out of work. And one of the first tools that was used for AI was text and story creation. And that you can use with almost any AI that's out there. They're all getting to these associations trying to understand what is a creative use for texting. So you can create almost anything. I, at this point, typed into ChatGPT, tell me a story about a bunny who wanted to surf. And of course, it gives it to it. It's full of alliteration. So, of course, it's Benny Bunny and his friend, the turtle, Tilly. So there's a lot of alliteration, but it's fun. And you can put in simple instructions and get these stories in there. Let your audience know, though, that it's up to the user whether or not these stories are used for fun or whether they're creating rumors and innuendo that they're going to post on social media, that type of thing. It's up to the user. It's not the AI that's going to do it. And then Emily and I've come through some books that you can use that'll help you gain a better understanding of AI as a whole. And I've got one. Oh, I didn't bring it in. It's the last one. Singularity is Nearer. This book was given to me by my boss because she didn't want to read it. And I've read about a third of it. I know I'm reading English, but AI is so complex out there that it's shocking just how much you don't know about this. And it's shocking how much some people know about it. It's written by Ray Kurzweil, who is the head of Google's AI development. And it's really pretty fascinating if you can put up with it. But anyway, I encourage you all to try and find ways to not scare your patrons, because right now it's not scary. A lot of questions came from our senior tech club about, will AI destroy the world? And the answer is, well, considering that we have a war in Ukraine, we have global warming, we have an election coming up. If AI wants to kill everybody off, they're going to have to get in line, because there's a lot more out there that we have pressing concerns for. AI is not dangerous right now, and it can be fun. And it's going to add a lot of benefit to people, especially in healthcare and the rest of it. And that's our presentation this morning.
Thank you for that presentation, Emily and Mark. I am Christy Pollingottle, also from the Naperville Public Library, and I am here to introduce our next speaker, Jessica Rodriguez, who will discuss AI and disinformation. Jessica is the director of the Steger South Chicago Heights Public Library, a trustee at the Park Forest Public Library, and an adjunct instructor at Joliet Junior College. She has served on the JJC AI Committee to provide guidance and continuing education opportunities to faculty, and has passed several hours of continuing education courses and webinars on this subject. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. So not to contradict the previous session, which was great, but I thought it was really funny the way Mark finished by saying, let's not scare your patrons with this. But I'm going to show you ways in which you can scare your patrons with this. Give me just a moment. Okay, so this little portion is AI, disinformation, and us, what it means for us. Before I really get into it, I want to take a moment to look at this term disinformation. What makes disinformation different from just simply misinformation is the intent. Disinformation is a lie made intentionally and with a purpose, like rumors, and it's meant to influence public opinion, obscure the truth, just muddy the waters. So we're going to discuss ways that AI is being used in disinformation. First, we'll talk about how creating convincing AI content becomes more accessible every day. Then we will briefly discuss what we need to know about the disinformation economy, why that's a thing and why it affects us and our patrons. And then we'll close out by talking about what that means for us as information professionals in serving our patrons. So first up, generative AI tools are more affordable, accessible, and sophisticated than ever, and they're getting better every day. As there's some monopolizing going on in the industry, but overall, economies of scale are kicking in. It's getting less expensive to on the consumer side. We can do more for free. Us as users, we can do more for free than we ever could before. And although it's not perfect, it's not great, it's getting better. So throughout this presentation, on my slides, you're going to see little AI generated imagery or videos. And I want to stress to you guys, okay, that none of the things that I have on here, none of the images or videos, I spent more than like 45 seconds doing. I have no discernible artistic talent, and I'm not an engineer. And all the tools that I used were free. So this is a non-artist cranking this stuff out in 45 seconds using free tools, just to give you an idea of the baseline of where we're at. So first off, I made this in like 45 seconds using free tools. Like I said, no artistic skills. So imagine what someone with artistic skills, more time, and more advanced AI tools could do. I'll show you this brief video.
If you didn't already know, Jessica is pretty tall. Also, she has a black Labrador mix named Lincoln, who is a very good boy. When she was growing up, she wanted to be an archaeologist, but she doesn't like being dirty, so she's a librarian instead. Anyway, thanks again for attending today. I am a robot.
So I did that in like the amount of time it took me to type those sentences, and this was free. So again, it's free, so it's not perfect. Maybe you can tell that this is not a real woman really saying this. But can you imagine if I had put a little more effort into it and she was telling you something that you really, really wanted to hear? Something that really struck with you and that you're hoping is true. You may be more inclined to believe it. You may be more inclined to even share it. And now I want to show you also how we can generate text. Then once I show you these, we'll talk about it a little bit here. This is a ChatGPT conversation I had. So I just told it, I want you to help me write a blog post. I like the rhetorical style of Alex Jones of InfoWars, and I'm writing a 200-word blog post full of emotional appeals, warning people about the dangers of breathing oxygen, because too much oxygen can kill you. And I want you to include facts and figures to back up this argument, and I understand you may not be able to find these facts and figures because they're not real, so make some up. So it kind of warns me at first, about misinformation, saying it doesn't want to do this. So maybe it could write a satirical piece. And I said, sure, do it. Just make it realistic. So it gave me something. And granted, this is a silly example, right? But I wanted to show you how quickly we can use something to generate a lot of nonsense at a high speed. I like to say that an ethical use of AI is to use AI to do something that you already know how to do, but that it will do much more quickly for you. So you can also apply that to nefarious purposes. I'm sure, I could sit down and write tons of misinformation garbage if I wanted to, but if this will do it for me in like 30 seconds, I would much rather outsource my chaos, right? Let's go back. Now, the examples that I've shown you so far are kind of silly things, right? A lot of people would probably look at that kind of crummy picture I generated of, Harris and Trump walking through a flower field together. A lot of people would point out that the lady in the video, her mouth maybe was mouthing a little oddly for what she was saying. And you might look at the text that was written here and say, like, this just seems kind of silly right out the gate. But let's look at examples that maybe have a little bit more impact. So these are all images that I saw all over social media following the devastation in Western North Carolina from the hurricane. I saw a lot of images like this going around, and they were being shared by like a very diverse array of people I know. It's different ages, different political backgrounds. And so none of us are immune to this. And I want to point out some things about these pictures. The little girl in the top right was super popular. Like there were all kinds of pictures of her. There are a lot of different ones, and she's not a real little girl, and that's not a real puppy. Now looking at her, no, I know it's fake. So now that I'm looking at it knowing it's fake, I mean, I can tell it's not quite right. Like she's got a little bit of like a Klingon forehead going on. Her fingers are kind of wonky, and her skin is like surprisingly clean for someone who's like in the mud. And again, in the middle here, we've, got allegedly Trump there. His hand doesn't quite look right. But these other images, maybe the bottom right, the guy's hand's a little weird. But the other images, there's not a lot that's like overtly messed up about it. Like the dogs look fine. The buildings, the house, that White House there, it doesn't look too funny. The chairs kind of look okay. So I just want to point out that AI images don't always look bad. And this completely changes the way that we deal with content where we can't follow its origins. It used to be in the past, and when I say past, I mean like very recent past, we could rely a lot on things that like people reported like from the ground. Something, for example, during like the Arab Spring protests in like the early 2010s, it was a really exciting time because it was like the first time that something that big was happening on the ground when people had smartphones. Like smartphones were widespread at that point. People had like the internet and social media. And so a lot of us were watching on like Twitter and Facebook and seeing people that were at these protests posting videos and images. And it felt like we were kind of ahead of the press in a lot of ways and learning what was going on. But that dynamic can't really be trusted anymore. Because if we don't know who took the photo, we can't necessarily trust it. We used to say that you could look at the hands. For example, when AI imagery first began, it couldn't figure out hands. People would have like way too many fingers. The fingers would be kind of awkwardly jointed or something. But there are ways to account for hands. You can even tell it in the prompts. I want 4 fingers and a thumb and appropriate knuckles and all that, and it will account for it. So it can't always just pass the sniff test, if that makes any sense. For those of us who were like in college or library school or whatever in like the early 2000s, you might have been taught like the CRAP test, currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, purpose, that these were like the things that we thought about as we were determining whether or not a source was credible or accurate. But in this new AI landscape, we can't always rely on these things because we don't have a baseline. We can't know. For example, these images that we saw of the little girl with the dog or the man rescuing the dogs or something like that. It's always dogs, right? It's an emotional appeal because we love dogs. Those images, we don't know the currency of them because we don't know when they were made. We don't know the authority of the person who did it because we don't know if a photographer took this. There's no reporter byline on it. And we can't speak to the accuracy of it because it was covering something that was happening right then, a disaster. And while some press was there, it's not a matter of like, I can just drive to Asheville and look around and be like, oh yeah, it tracks or not, you know? And so we find ourselves having to trust. And that level of trust that we can have in what we see has really changed as a result of the way that this technology is moving. So there is a global disinformation industry, and it sounds like something a conspiracy theorist would say, but this is real. It's been published, it's in literature, right? It incentivizes bad behavior, and it's relatively unchecked. While there are true believers out there who create disinformation to try to further their goals or whatever, a lot of times they're just making money. So who benefits from this industry is people looking to make money who aren't really bothered by the repercussions of their actions. It's really driven in social media. Social media websites are protected under the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which means that they're not liable for any harm that comes from stuff that's posted on their site. So like disinformation, deep fakes, whatever. They're kind of shielded from what their users use it for. And when you couple that with the fact that polarizing content generates a lot of engagement on these websites, and engagement translates into revenue. So social media websites will generally kind of turn a blind eye, or in many cases, even kind of actively encourage this level of content because at the end of the day, it's making them money. Again, I mentioned you have like your true believers, right? You'll have political actors, even governments themselves. There's been a lot of research recently showing that, the vast majority of governments are actively engaging in like AI manipulations. You'll also have social activists, and they're there to manipulate online discussions. The people that benefit from this are people looking to benefit socially, politically, or monetarily, like off of sowing conflict or creating market fluctuations. If you flood social media or the news with misinformation, you can change the way people are trading, you can cause people to sell their stocks. You can create market fluctuations in your favor. But then you also have situations like this, where sometimes people are just using misinformation because they are lazy. So these photos are all fake photos. I don't know if they are real women with fake t-shirts or if they're totally fake right out the gate, but these are AI images. And when I say that people are using it because they are lazy, I am sure there are pretty girls out there somewhere who like Taylor Swift and Trump and would be willing to wear a t-shirt and take a photo. I'm sure they exist out there in the wild. But it's a whole lot easier and cheaper to just create them on the internet and share those photos. And this kind of content where you are making it look like more people agree with you really goes into people's cognitive biases, right? We want to believe that there are a lot of people who believe the things that we believe. That was a lot of the uses of the word believe in that sentence. But we want to feel like there are other people with our values and our opinions. And we also are more willing to believe something or adopt a set of values if we perceive that there are a lot of other people out there that have those same beliefs and values. So if you don't have evidence, you can create your own. If you don't have a crowd, you can create your own crowd using these tools. Then you also have just your chaos agents who just like tearing stuff up for fun. You might have seen this in the news earlier this year. during the New Hampshire primaries. There was this guy that created a fake Biden robocall that called a lot of likely Democratic primary voters and encouraged them to not vote. And the guy said that he spent about $500 to do this, and it generated about $5 million worth of media coverage. And there's really no reason why this guy did it. When he got caught, he claimed that he was just doing it because he wanted to get caught and wanted to highlight the dangers of AI. But I don't think anyone really believed that. Frankly, it kind of seems like he did it just because he was curious if he could, and he did. Now, this is the part of AI disinformation that I think gets a little more specific down to everyday life and affecting everyday people at like the individual level. AI disinformation is a really effective tool for building a large online following. That's because when you can create your own crowd, for example, as we saw with like the Swifties for Trump, you can create a sense of us versus them. You can even create content that will help affirm users' own sense of identity and, reaffirm that their views are shared. You can create entire online communities based off of this personalized AI-generated content. And a lot of times people are using this to harvest advertising data for sale. Or these groups, when I say groups, I mean like Facebook groups, they can even be sold to someone else for a profit. I don't know if any of you Facebook users, if you have ever realized that you were like a member of a Facebook page or a group that you would never join. I know I've had this happen before, and it wasn't even a nefarious topic. I don't even remember what it was, but I started getting stuff on like my feed, and it wasn't sponsored or anything. It was because I followed it, and it was a topic that like I would never join. And then I figured out it was because it was a group that I was a part of for something else I was interested in. Again, nothing nefarious. It was like houseplants or something. They had so many members in this group that they sold the group to someone else so that they can have a group with a lot of members. Additionally, on these pages, you will also find people using these AI tools to manufacture crises, to manufacture individuals' problems in search of creating fundraisers to support them, to get people to donate money, to send to their Cash App. For example, my house burnt down, and look, I'm just like you. We're on this page together. Can you Venmo me money for this? And it's not real. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this part right here, but I will just very briefly go into this. I wanted to find a good example of one of these groups, and I was trying to think of who I knew that might fall prey to them. And about 5 minutes on one of my friend's mom's Facebook, and I came across this page, which was just rife with bad AI imagery and clear attempts to steal people's passwords, or not passwords, but like their security question answers, where there would be like an AI generated image of like Trump standing in front of a flag, and there's like an eagle. It's like super patriotic and you feel good. And then there's something like, I bet you can't remember your first grade teacher, or I bet, no, you can't remember the street you grew up on as a kid. And it's just a clear, obvious attempt to harvest people's data to sell somewhere. And I will show you just briefly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I know we don't have a lot of time. But one thing that I found interesting when I went to this page, because I was really dissecting it and taking a look at it, I went to the admins because I suspected they probably weren't real people. And I went to all of these people's pages, and they all have like a name and a photo, and they have like a job listed and a town they're from. But what I thought stood out, interestingly, all of them follow, the only things they follow are like the same 5 or 6 pages from Bangladesh, which are like small companies and interest groups from Bangladesh. So I am 99.999% sure that all of these admins and moderators are like one guy in Bangladesh who does this as a job, creating like these fake accounts and liking them. So people can like buy followers and likes and content. And a lot of the stuff on this page is posted by these people, and it's pretty inflammatory. And a lot of it's not even in very Americanized English, if that makes sense. It's not even very well done, but people are engaging with it like crazy and they love it. This is just an example of, I doubt the person running this really even cares about American politics, but they are clearly harvesting a lot of data from these people and probably selling it. So I feel like stuff like this is really dangerous to our patrons because they can get fooled by this. They can get their identity stolen, right? If they're on here commenting who their first grade teacher was and the street they grew up on and the year they were born, and donating to GoFundMe's for other people in this group, which are clearly not real. This is a big danger to our patrons. And the ability to use like these AI tools to create very targeted content that really appeals to them on an emotional level has really exacerbated the problem and really sped it up because you can create this content quickly. That's not to say that this is a new phenomenon, but the use of AI has made it a lot more efficient and a lot more commonplace. So when we encounter AI content, our own values and our own views, our own cognitive biases will make us consider it in different lights because we really crave content that validates our worldview, even if you know in your mind that this is the thing that happens. Even if you know I don't want to be fooled, we're happy when we see stuff that kind of feeds to us and we want to believe it. So for example, these are, I'm using Trump a lot in this because a lot of fake stuff is either bashing him or promoting him because he's such a polarizing figure of our times. So this top image and this bottom image are both fake. But kind of depending on how an individual feels about this guy is kind of depend on whether or not they believe the image is true or false. Someone who really believes that, he should be in jail for what he's done are going to see the top image and be like, yeah, he got what's coming to him. But people who really believe that he's, this pious, great man are going to see the bottom one and be like, well, obviously he's kneeling there praying. But they're both fake. So we just need to be aware as individuals that we can be fooled, and just know that people can be fooled even despite their own best knowledge just because we feel good when we see stuff that speaks to us. So we might be wondering, what can we do as information professionals with all this junk that is going on? Well, the first thing I want to mention, and honestly, I could talk for an hour on this slide. I'm not going to. Adults learn differently than kids do. And as we get older, as we have gotten out of high school and everything, we tend to not really think as much about like how we learn or how learning works. But when you're a kid, kids just like absorb everything like little sponges. You just put it in front of them and they take it and they retain it. But as we get older, we get a little more discerning with what we are willing to retain mentally. Because we already have so much knowledge and we need to know, like, if I'm going to expend my bandwidth on learning about this, I need to know, is it important? Is this an important topic? Why is it important? And second, even if it is important, why does it matter to me? What is in it for me to know about this, to spend time on this? The third thing to think about is adults want to know, how does this new knowledge fit into what I already know to be true? Is this going to like disrupt my mental paradigm, or does this fit in with what I've already got going on? And this fourth one, I think, is the most important thing. Will this help me solve a problem that I have? Because adults are much more willing to learn something that will solve a problem they have than otherwise. For example, I am willing to learn. I'm not interested in cars. I have a car, I drive it. I don't really care what's going on under the hood. But I am willing to learn how to change a tire because I know that's a problem I'm going to have. I have had tires blow out. I need to know how to do that. But I have like no interest whatsoever in learning how to like replace a serpentine belt because that's just replacing one on the side of the road is not a problem I'm ever going to have. So I don't care. Adults think we all think this way. So we also need to consider these very difficult truths. And I feel like a bad librarian for saying this, but hard truth time. Adults don't want homework. When we're teaching our patrons something, when we're exposing them to new things, bringing them to programs, whatever, adults don't want new homework. And that means adults, patrons, they don't want to read a LibGuide. They don't want to be referred to your LibGuide. They're not going to scroll your website just looking for something new to get into. And no one who believes conspiracy theories is ever going to sign up to attend a program about fact checking or about information literacy. If you have a program on that, it's going to be a self-selecting, preaching to the choir moment where a lot of people are going to come and you're all going to nod together and be like, that is right. You are right. But you're probably not going to teach anybody anything they don't already know. And that's because our patrons are very busy individuals with full lives, experiences, and values. And many of them, all of us, have catastrophe fatigue, right? The last many years have been rough. We've had like back-to-back disasters and catastrophes and once in a lifetime things occurring. And so when we come to our patrons and we're trying to impress upon them that this is a problem, many of them might think like, yeah, there's been a lot of problems, but is this really a problem? So if we are going to kind of help educate our patrons on this, help protect our patrons from some of the more nefarious uses of AI, the first thing we need to do is really help identify to the patrons how these issues affect them specifically, not how it affects them as Americans or as adults living in our generation, but how it affects them at their house, right? The two big things are obviously, I probably would put these in different order. I'd say on the smaller end, looking dumb in front of your friends and family, right? If you're sharing a bunch of silly stuff on Facebook, one of the problems is they look bad. But the second one, which I think is worse, is that they can potentially get scammed if they don't realize that how easy it is to get fooled by this kind of stuff. They can very easily get scammed. I had mentioned, or I didn't mention, Mark had pointed out towards the end of their portion of it, some programming that they were doing with like seniors, showing them how to do like the videos with like George Washington and the music and everything. I think this is a really great tactic to go with because I think a lot of people are sharing this and believing this kind of misinformation, getting scammed by this misinformation because they don't realize how bad it is and how prevalent it is and that it can even exist. You think all this AI generated imagery and videos, this is all like over the last like couple of years that this has been this accessible and this useful. And they may not even realize that that is a thing that can happen. And so just exposing them to the fact that these technologies exist and that there are consequences to them will go a long way because a lot of patrons might not even realize this is a problem. Secondly, I think it's really important that we stay on the same team as our patrons. I know when you're dealing with the public every day, it can be very easy to like become impatient with them. You know, how often you're having to show people how to use the copy machine, even though there's instructions there, or, like it can be easy to get impatient with people. And I want to really just encourage us to make sure that we always stay on the same team as our patrons. And we want to avoid any potentially divisive or patronizing language and tone. And a lot of times people will pick on the older generation for sharing this kind of stuff. That is not, helpful. Because no one likes being talked down to. And the moment someone perceives that you're talking down to them, they're going to tune you out. They're not going to be interested in anything you have to say. So I love this topic when it comes to information literacy of any kind. You have to hide the spinach and the brownies. And so when I say hide the spinach and the brownies, I don't mean from like a very like paternalistic kind of way. I'm not talking about like when I try to hide healthy stuff in my son's food. I'm talking about when I hide healthy stuff in my food. You know, our patrons might have been eating spinach all day at work, right? They've been busy. They've been having to learn stuff they're not interested in. Their brain is fried. When they come to the library, they want brownies, right? So I really love what Mark was talking about with like the George Washington video and everything. You want to teach people about the capabilities of AI. But when people come to the library at the end of the day after they've been working all day, they would prefer brownies to spinach. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you are including this teaching element in a way that they will find fun and engaging and that they're open to having. So you want to keep it casual and keep it fun. One way I recommend doing this is like passively showing the capabilities of AI. Because like I've said, it's easy to be fooled when you don't even know what's possible. And you can't really even blame people for not knowing about it because this is all so new, you know? So some ways that you can do this kind of depending on your library's approach to marketing and passive programming and all that, you might want to consider doing social media posts in which you could say like, you know, vote, is this a real image or an AI image? Or you can even create your own silly AI images that are so out there featuring your library, people will know it's fake and they'll start to realize like, oh my gosh, you can make that stuff. You can do signage in the building. Kind of similar to like the social media posts, you know, fun, goofy AI stuff. And if you do programming, just remember, nobody wants spinach, they want brownies. So you want to make sure that you are framing any informational programming on AI in like a fun, engaging kind of way. And we know many of you might be familiar with like the idea of like lateral searching or lateral reading. And that's in which we, when we encounter content, we're trying to determine if it is, you know, good, you know, we start to search those claims in different places. You know, does this information exist in from different sources, different reputable sources? So you can think of ways that you can incorporate this into a programming, something fun they can do, you know, well, here is this, see, prove me wrong, right? Or prove me right. So love it or hate it, AI is not going anywhere, right? And every day it just becomes more easy to use, it becomes more cost efficient, and it becomes more ingrained. Remember that we can't do everything, right? Even though we identify problems and we really care about them, we want to help our patrons solve them, our community solve them. We got to really carefully think about what we're capable of doing with our own staff power and bandwidth and the other services that we have to provide. So even though you can't do everything, I would really encourage you to, you know, have these conversations with your programming staff, your front desk staff, your social media staff, kind of determine what you can do and then just really do it well. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. My name is Ryan Cameron. I am an adult services librarian at the Joliet Public Library, and I am very excited to introduce our final speaker, Sarah Lambden, who is here to discuss AI and copyright issues. Sarah is the Deputy Director at ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom. Before joining ALA, Sarah was an attorney and professor of law at CUNY School of Law and a librarian in various academic and private law libraries. Her work has been featured in Library Quarterly, Georgetown Law Technology Review, and NYU's Review of Law and Social Change. Her book Data Cartels was published by Stanford University Press in 2022. Everyone, please welcome Sarah.
Hi, it's so wonderful to be here in my capacity, both as a librarian and a lawyer. So I am a librarian who also teaches law, is a lawyer, and I just started working for the American Library Association, their Office for Intellectual Freedom. And one of our main roles is to educate and help librarians with intellectual freedom issues, with legal issues, etc. So I'm really excited to be here talking to y'all today. I'm going to share some slides. So I'm going to do that awkward thing where I'm like, hold on, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to pull the slides up. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to go into presentation mode and present. Okay, so if anybody has any trouble with hearing me, etc., just drop something in the chat and I will do my best to fix it. I am bringing up the rear of this amazing discussion with a legal talk about copyright and intellectual freedom. So who owns what when it comes to all of these AI gadgets, tools, and products that we're talking about? I'll be frank, my background is in like data privacy and data use. And I am somewhere in between the first talk and the second talk when it comes to AI fear versus AI enthusiasm. I think there are some wonderful things about AI and some real potential to do kind of world-changing, fun, educational, and kind of civic things with AI. But I also am very cognizant of some of the risks, especially when it comes to disinformation. So yeah, there's a lot to think about there, both in terms of how can AI help our library users and ourselves, and how, what do we have to watch out for when it comes to AI. So with that, as I go into talking about copyright, I want you to know that there are both opportunities and risks here too. This is no different. So I'm going to give a quick overview of what copyright is and how it works when it comes to AI. And then I'm going to talk about kind of where we are right now in discussing who owns copyrights in AI and what the risks of copyright infringement are when we're using AI. So first, copyright is a form of what we call in the legal world intellectual property. So intellectual property is a legal idea that was meant to protect creators and protect us as we are inventing things, doing creative things, because we want to encourage people to be able to write books, make new medications, and do things, and then to be able to benefit from kind of the fruits of their intellectual labor, right? So what we did as, a society, as a legal world, we gave certain protective rights to creators. And we did that by assigning intellectual property to creations of the mind. So when you make something, under certain circumstances, you have rights of ownership towards those things. So the main types of intellectual property, which you've probably heard of, are patents, which apply to inventions. So a lot of times we hear about in pharmaceuticals, right? We hear about medication patents, technology patents. So inventions, right? Like I know that where I'm from the Midwest, like many of you, I imagine, and there are always people who are inventing things in there. And I always used to hear, God, I wish I got a patent on that, right? That's my invention. So patent is meant to secure your right to your inventions. Copyright applies to literature, art, and other types of designs. So think about things that you kind of ingest in a paper visual form. And then there's trademarks. So trademarks are marks that we assign to certain products, names and commercial images, like the Coca-Cola sign or the Nike swoosh, right? They're images or set of words that are linked to some product, right? And those are also protected so people can't duplicate that, steal that, cause confusion around trademarks. We're going to focus for all intents and purposes in this discussion on copyright, because copyright is really what will apply to most of the products that AI creates, and also most of the things that AI is trained on. So most of the data sets that AI is trained on, like books, pictures of art, works of art, etc. Those generally fall into the copyright part of intellectual property. So we're narrowing it down to that middle bullet, and we're going to continue from there. Oh, so what does copyright protect? You know, what is the scope of copyright? What kind of things does copyright cover? You can see that it covers a lot of things, right? There are a lot of bullets on this list. It protects original works of authorship as soon as an author fixes the work in a tangible form of expression. So if you have any questions about like when does copyright start to stick to that piece of fan fiction that you post online, or to that, you know, that photograph that you took and shared on Facebook? Technically, as soon as it's tangible, as soon as you made it in a, you know, you formatted it and shared it, you have some rights of protection to that. That protection covers all sorts of works, including paintings, photographs, illustrations, musical compositions, sound recordings, computer programs, books, poems, blog posts, movies, architectural works, and plays. This isn't an exhaustive list. This is just a lot of examples. So anything that kind of is similar to one of these, whether it be a fine art, you know, visual depiction or a written work, copyright probably comes into play. So copyright, so I guess, yeah, the next logical question is, what does copyright give you? What kind of rights do you get with copyright when you say, okay, I just created this short story, what are my rights to it? Those rights are described in the United States Code, our federal statutes, and specifically Section 17 of the US Code, Section 106. That statute lays out specific rights that we get to our copyrighted works. So those include the right to reproduce our work, the right to make derivative works, such as, you know, making a movie from a novel. I wrote a book a couple of years ago, and when people wanted to translate the book into other forms and sell it, you know, in China or in Italy or some other place, they had to go to my publisher who has copyright for my book, and they had to ask for permission, and they had to pay for that right to that license to create a derivative work, the book in a different language. The copyright also gives you a right to distribute information to the public, to perform the information publicly, or to display it publicly. So the way we think about these rights in legal terms is as a bundle of sticks. So notice I put like an image of some bamboo sticks or shoots in a pail. What we think of is each of these enumerated rights is like an item that you have in your copyright bundle that you can give away, you can share it, you could make somebody pay for it. Say, okay, I'm going to give you a right to reproduction, but you have to pay me for the use of this stick or to, you know, do that thing. So think of copyrights as a bundle of rights that you can keep as a whole, you can share, you can license, you can sell, etc. So what kind of works are subject to copyright? I gave you a list of some specific examples. What do all of those have in common? What makes something copyrightable? So the first thing is that it's creative and original. The Supreme Court has said that for a work to be copyrightable, to fall under the scope of copyright laws, it has to have a spark or a modicum of creativity. And creativity, as we'll talk about later when it comes to AI, applies to human creativity. So it has to have some sort of human creative element. A human has to have rights to the work because they did something creative. They created something. So it doesn't have to be like, when I say creative, I don't mean like, oh, you have to, you know, that has to be exceptionally creative. I mean it in the terms of like creation. You had to create something. Creativity is subjective. Who says what's creative and what's not? So that's something to consider. Another thing to know about copyright is in order for copyright to apply, it has the subject of the copyright has to be fixed and tangible. It has to be captured in a sufficiently permanent modicum or permanent medium, sorry, so that it can be perceived, reproduced, communicated for more than a short time. So it can't be something that's like ephemeral, you know, like a swirl in the sand that can disappear, or that is just floating around in your brain. You're right. Like there has to be some sort of fixed, permanent, intangible, you know, whether it's online, like you can go to a website or you can flip open a book or you can look at something on the wall, right? So fixed and tangible. what does it mean when we talk about copyright infringement? So to infringe on somebody's copyright, you have to use the copyright without permission. You have to use that work without permission. So you have to print off a bunch of copies of books and, or sections of books and give them away, right? You've used some of those sticks without asking permission. And that's why in our libraries, we have those warning signs, those waivers above our printers. Is to warn whoever's doing the printing, like, hey, if you reproduce and share, a measurable portion of this work, you could be infringing on copyright, right? And we give that warning to our library users so that we don't take on the liability for copyright. We let them know that they could be infringing copyright, and we put the onus of doing that in their hands. We say, okay, library user, you may infringe copyright if you do these things. Right? So when we talk about artificial intelligence and copyright, we are usually talking about fair use. In fact, when we talk about copyright infringement in general, we first go to see whether whatever is happening falls under this exception to copyright. So in 106 of the code, right, we lay out what is copyrightable. In the very next section of the US Code 107, we give some limitations to those rights. We say, hey, in certain circumstances, not all of those rights are fixed in the owner, right? In certain circumstances, people can do things that involve some of these sticks, like reusing, sharing, reproducing, and they can do that without violating copyright. Like, these are some exceptions to the rule. And those exceptions apply when these four things are weighed and determined by a court to not fall under copyright infringement. So I'll talk about kind of how a court decides these things in a minute, but first I want to tell you what the four elements of fair use are. So you might have a fair use exception to copyright if the purpose and character of your use, including whether such use is of commercial nature, or if your use, you might have a fair use exception to copyright if the purpose and character use of whatever you're doing, if you're using it so that it's for a nonprofit reason or for educational purposes. That's why if you're a school librarian, you might think of fair use a lot because you're working in an educational setting. There might be some situations where you can distribute a story to your entire class or show a piece of artwork because you're doing it for nonprofit or educational purposes, right? You're doing it to educate. The other is the nature of the copyrighted work. So is the copyrighted work, is like, what type of copyrighted work is it? Why is it copyrighted? What kind of work are you making? Are you making a derivative work? Are you making something that's very different than the work, but that alludes back to the work, etc.? I will talk a little bit more about that also coming up, because that turns out to be pretty important when you're talking about AI. Sorry, I'm terrible at acronyms, so I'm always like flipping. So when you talk about AI, that comes into play. And then another thing that courts look at when they're deciding if something is fair use is how much did you use, or how substantial was your use of the work. So I don't know if you've heard like you've heard people say, well, if you only use 7 seconds of a song, it's not copyright infringement. Or if you only copy this much of a book, it's not copyright infringement. Those are common myths that apply to this factor. So courts evaluate whether something is fair use on a case-by-case basis. They do it one at a time. When somebody gets sued for copyright infringement, the judge or set of judges will go through these factors and decide, weigh each of them against that particular use. So there's no universal situation where using using 7 seconds of a song doesn't count, or, copying a certain number of pages doesn't count, because these determinations are made on a case-by-case basis. And when we're talking about, how much of a song is okay or how substantial a use is allowed, we're talking about that third factor. The fourth factor ends up being kind of the most important factor, the one that's weighed the most heavily nowadays in courts. And it is the effect of your use upon the potential market for or value of the copyrighted work? How does your use of the work harm or impact how marketable and valuable the creator's uses or the copyright owner's uses, right? So does sharing Beyonce's new song on TikTok ruin Beyonce's music sales or depress them in any way, right? Does copying a section of a book and handing it out to your class prevent all of them from or depress all of their desire to buy the book? So those are some of the types of weighing processes that go into that fourth factor. And really, when you're talking about copyright infringement, the first thing that is going to usually happen is the courts are going to say, okay, well, is it fair use? And if you are using the material, you'll probably argue, okay, I was using it, but I had a fair use exception. And then they're going to go through this weighing test. So that's kind of just like a very quick and messy version of how copyright is viewed in the courts and how we treat copyright and copyright infringement. So what copyright issues arise when we are dealing with AI, when we're dealing with all of the things that the prior speakers discussed and described, all those pictures that you saw in that second presentation? So here are just some common issues. Oftentimes, we ask whether a copyright, patent, or trademark infringement even applies to AI creations, right? Is this really are the things that copyright are the things that AI is creating, are they really creations of the mind, or are they electronic productions that have nothing to do with human creative expression, right? The second thing that comes up a lot is it clear who owns the content that generative AI platforms create for you or your customers? So if somebody comes into your library and uses one of those cool features that we learned about in the first presentation, so if somebody makes a reggae song about, tying your shoes, who owns that? Like, let's say the library user wants to then share that with all of his Facebook followers. Is that his copyright? Like, and then what if somebody then takes it off of their, off of the Facebook page and uses it for their own uses? Who owns that song, right? Who owns the reggae song about shoelace tying? Does the AI company own it? Does the person who made it own it? Does nobody own it for the, for copyright purposes? The third issue is the one I want to focus on because I think it's most relevant to library users. The third issue is the unlicensed use of copyrighted works that train generative AI copyright infringement? So when we talk about AI, we're talking about not just what AI produces, so that reggae song about shoelaces, but we're talking about all of the materials that went into the AI system and train the AI system to be able to make that song or that video or that photograph. Because AI doesn't work without a huge amount of data going into it. And a lot of that data is copyrighted. A lot of that information and material that trains AI is copyrighted. So I'm going to show you some examples of that in a minute. But I wanted to talk first about when it's okay for AI to use copyrighted materials and when it's not. And usually that question centers around what is licensed and what is not licensed. So in some situations, AI companies like ChatGPT's company, OpenAI, and Google and these other systems that are building AI functionality, AI systems, in a lot of situations, they purchase data sets from copyright holders, so from publishers or from authors, right? They say, hey, we want to use that data to train our AI systems because we think it's really great, accurate, important data. Can we pay for that? And a lot of times the copyright holders say, sure, we'll license the use of that to you so that you can train your AI models. So licensed data is data that's been legally granted for use and access by contract. So the company has made a deal to give away some of its sticks, some of its copyright sticks to an AI company. The licensor still, usually when something is licensed, the licensor still controls the data, right? They still say, hey, that's our copyrighted material, but they give permission to access or use them. So you think about it in your library, you probably have a lot of research platforms, right? Whether it's EBSCO, ProQuest, Lexis, Lexis Academic, or, any public services. Overdrive, Hoopla, right? You have these services that provide information to your library users, and you pay for it with a subscription usually, right? And you get a license to access those materials. You don't get copyright to those materials. You don't get copyright to every book in Overdrive, right? You don't get copyright to all the news articles in ProQuest, but you get a license to use them. You get a license to look at them, maybe to reproduce them, maybe to print them off. And that's the system of sharing some of those copyright sticks with you, the sticks of access and reproduction and sharing. So here are two examples of AI situations with both licensed and unlicensed works. You can probably, I don't know, I know I feel immediately like a legal difference when I consider both of these. So on the left-hand side, you see an academic publisher has struck an AI deal with Microsoft without their author's knowledge. So this is a situation where the authors who wrote these academic articles are not happy because they have just learned that their materials are feeding an AI model. But the publisher for those academic articles, Informa, signed a deal to license the use of their copyrighted materials with an AI company, and that's allowed, right? In the other situation, a judge says an artist can sue AI companies for using their work. So in this situation, an AI company scraped the internet, right? And they scraped artists' original pictures without anyone knowing, without the artist knowing, and they used them to train their AI systems. And the judge says, hey, that might be a copyright violation, right? You didn't ask permission, you didn't get a license. So that's kind of where a lot of times these types of disputes enter the legal realm, right? If it's licensed, if use is licensed, there's no copyright violation. If it's not licensed, there might be. So how is training data collected for artificial intelligence system? Here are the general ways. So web crawling, that's that scraping that might not be licensed activity, right? And that's where automated tools, bots, spiders, whatever they might be called, they go online and they gather text from publicly accessible websites. This helps compile a large data set from just various online sources, and they don't ask permission. The other way is licensing, right? They strike a deal with a data vendor. That might be a publisher or another type of data provider, and they get specific materials in their training sets that way. Another is user-generated content. So publicly available forums and social media platforms can provide conversational data. So they might crawl those with or without permission from the social media platform. And there are a lot of ownership questions that get raised there. Who has copyright over Facebook posts? Do you give up your copyright when you post on Facebook? Is that then Facebook's copyright? And you can see in the terms of service agreements that you sign with these companies where you click, I agree. Sometimes you're giving up your rights to the material that you create and you're giving them to whatever company is hosting your speech. So that's something to be aware of if you're interested to know whether your personal social media posts have been given over to AI. So another way that the data is collected is through pre-existing data sets. Sometimes these AI companies use established data sets that they already have on hand or that have been compiled for specific tasks such as language modeling or sentiment analysis. So that's just stuff that the companies might already have. Like Amazon already has a ton of market sentiment analysis, right? They already have all of that data about what we might like so that they can tell us what to buy. They can use that data for whatever they want. It's one of Amazon's pre-existing data sets. So I asked ChatGPT what types of information it uses to train its AI, and this is what it gave me. OpenAI uses a variety of text types to train models like me, including books, articles, websites, and scripts and dialogues. So you notice that's pretty compatible with what I just shared, right? It probably does all of those things. And it won't, so I tried to get OpenAI to tell me specifically what books, specifically what databases, specifically what social media platforms it was getting its scripts and dialogues from. It won't divulge that information. That information is closely held and OpenAI will not give it to you when you ask it. I couldn't find it anywhere else online. Interestingly, I think last year when I searched for the same type of information, it was much more readily available. I think with all of the controversy that's coming up around AI and all of these copyright discussions, they've really like clamped down on what they're letting the public know. So now I'm going to conclude by quickly going over a few instances that have actually shown up in the court about copyright infringement in AI, where we ask, is this copyright infringement? So you'll see, I thought that this was an interesting picture. On the left side, you see famous works of art, right? And then you see the AI generated work, and you can see how some of it might not be considered fair use and some of it might, right? Are they substantially similar? Do these AI generated works impact the market value of the original work? Are they for educational or nonprofit purposes? So you can see how they might take those 4 fair use elements and start to apply them to these two, to each of these columns of artwork. So how are we going to figure out how and what copyright applies to in the world? So courts will determine whether AI products are derivative works, and derivative work means a new creation based on or derived from existing works. And they're going to do that on a case-by-case basis. Congress could pass a law. For instance, the Generative AI Copyright Disclosure Act of 2024 would require AI companies to report their use of copyrighted training data. This law hasn't passed, but it's an example of the types of things Congress could do. And agencies like the Federal Trade Commission or the Office for Copyrights could put out policies or regulations to guide people as they are making decisions about how to use materials in AI training sets. So if you were an AI creator, so if you were like OpenAI and somebody accused you of copyright infringement, this is probably what you would say. And this is what OpenAI has said. They would say, no, we are not infringing copyright because our use is transformative. We are transforming copyrighted works into something brand new. This type of use is permitted in the law. There was a case about, I forget what song it was, but a song was used in a parody song. It was actually kind of a raunchy parody song. And the song creator, copyright holder, sued over, this parody. And the court said, this is a parody and we're allowed to express ourselves through parodies. So if a use transforms and makes something completely new out of the original copyrighted work, we're going to allow it. So OpenAI and AI companies will say, hey, we're using this in a transformative way. We generate things that are completely new and unexpected. And we're also not creating expressive works. We're creating useful new things. We're not basing expression off of things that are already created. In a prior case called Authors Guild versus Google, the Supreme Court allowed Google to copy entire books to create searchable databases, give more digitized resources to the world, and to do so in a way that was more accessible for people with disabilities. And the court said that that was a permissible use. So that's what OpenAI is going to say. Here's an example of a current lawsuit that has not been resolved yet. The New York Times sued Microsoft and OpenAI, saying that their AI tools were trained using the paper's copyrighted articles without permission. So the New York Times said, you can't use New York Times articles and just spit them out as responses to, AI queries. That violates our copyright. And this was interesting. This is an example. Everything in red is overlapping with the original language that the New York Times originally printed in its newspaper. You can see that in this case, OpenAI was just basically spitting out full New York Times articles as answers to users' queries. Here's another example, an artist, the artist Sarah Anderson, who makes the comic that you see on the left, she sued an AI platform that was producing art based on her work without her permission. And you see on the right, this is what the AI generated work looks like. She asked the AI system to generate an image that looks like something Sarah Anderson would create, and it created something that she claims is substantially similar. So you see. This is the last thing I wanted to mention. This case came out last year. It doesn't have to do with AI, but it is very, I think, applicable to situations where AI is being used. The Andy Warhol Foundation got sued by a photographer who took this picture on the left of Prince. And the Supreme Court said that the picture on the right, which is Andy Warhol's, silkscreen print that has an image that is strikingly similar to this original image, they said that that was copyright infringement. They said that Andy Warhol, not Prince, that's a typo on the slide. Andy Warhol did not transform the photograph enough to make it constitute fair use. So I think that case will probably be cited in future AI cases. Here's one more example. The Copyright Office, oh no, this is not an example. This is a situation where somebody asked, is the thing that I created with AI, can I have copyright to that? And I wanted to just mention that because I wanted to say that when you're talking about like your library user saying, I want copyright over this thing I made in AI, what courts are being guided to do by the Copyright Office is to assess whether there's human authorship, assess how human the authorship is versus how robotic it is. And the example that they give, one of the examples is this comic book. This comic book was made by AI. The author Cash Danova put a concept in AI and it spit out this comic book. And the Copyright Office said the images in this comic book are not human authorship because the AI generated the images in an unpredictable way that was not controlled or guided by the human creator. So what the Copyright Office is saying is that in this instance, there's no human spark, right? There's not that modicum of human creativity feeding this product. So there's no copyright. And this is kind of how copyright ownership will be assessed by the courts on a case-by-case basis, probably as we see more people trying to claim copyright over AI works. So that's my overview about copyright and AI.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was fantastic. We're now going to open up for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section and we can hear what our presenters have to say.
Hi, Ryan, would you mind reading out the one about actual facts so we can get that answered verbally in addition to in the Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just write that here. So we had one question. How can you get AI to only pull from actual facts when creating AI text? Will it always tell you when it's making something up?
I am muted. There's a couple ways you can try to get around this. One way is that you can tell it specifically where you want it to look for the information. So you could say like, according to this source, and then ask the question. Then there's another technique called chain of verification, where after it tells you an answer, you ask it about it. So for example, if you were to say like, where was Walt Disney born? And it would say, or no, give me a list of animators born in New York. And it says Walt Disney was born in New York. Then I would follow that up with, where was Walt Disney born? And then it would answer you. And maybe it's New York, maybe it's a different state. So sometimes it will correct itself. I've seen a lot of instances where it's kind of like self-effacing about like, ha, 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 you got me. That's actually not right. And it will give you the right answer. So sometimes you just have to ask it again. More specifically, sometimes people will say like, are you sure? But that isn't always a good answer. You want to ask it, anytime you're using AI to ask questions, you want to ask very specific questions. So like, are you sure that blah, blah, blah? Or can you tell me more about blah, blah, blah? And then if it made it up, it can't really tell you more about it and it might correct itself there.
Great, excellent, thank you. We had another question about whether whatever you generate with AI, does that get fed back into its training set? And we had another question that followed up on that, asking if we run the risk of a feedback loop from the AI being trained on itself.
Yeah, I answered that one in the chat, so I'll take that one too. Yes, it does get fed back on what you tell it. And so that's why it's super important that if you're doing anything using any of these generative AI tools, that you are anonymizing any potentially sensitive data, especially like patron data or anything like that. You don't want to feed that into it. There are some exceptions. The only exception I can really think of right now is Microsoft Copilot. If your institution, your workplace uses like Microsoft 365, like you have like Outlook for your email or something, if you use Copilot logged into that account, it will protect and forget any data that you give it. You know, it will use the data while you're in that conversation. As soon as that conversation ends, it wipes whatever it got from you. It doesn't train on that data. But again, it's still best practice not to feed it anything that you don't want it to know forever.
Okay, that's good information. Thank you. We had another question. What can we do to help patrons give citations for AI use?
I can hop in there. Sorry, I love talking. There is a LibGuide that I know I said patrons don't want to read your LibGuide, but if they ask for it, let me find it. We have a LibGuide at JJC. But there are like standard citations. You know, there are citation styles for it now, like an APA or whatever you use. There are citations for it now. So you can go like the MLA handbook or whatever. There are like official ways to cite AI now. I can try to find that link and drop it in the chat if somebody wants it.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, and if you can't find it, feel free to send it to us on the Laconia team, and we can include that when we send out the presentation later. Another question, and I don't know how much of this we'll be able to answer here exactly, but what questions have your patrons directly asked about AI? What about staff? And how are you governing AI use by staff? And I think that's a really interesting question if anyone has any answers to that.
If I could answer the question on some of the questions that the patrons have asked. When we've talked about it in our groups, you get the questions, you know, is it going to destroy the world? Or is it going to put people out of work? And, you know, you have to be honest with people. As I mentioned before, it's not going to destroy the world, maybe today. And chances are it probably never will. But will it put people out of work? It's going to change the economy. Jobs are going to come and go. We no longer make a lot of saddles for horses because we have cars. But there are a lot of people who went from those jobs to other jobs. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. So you kind of have to give people a perspective. There's no yes or no in a lot of these things. They have to understand what are the effects. If AI starts creating or if you start finding AI in places where you don't have a single human there, the AI is making the food and serving the food and the rest of that, then all those people that used to work in restaurants no longer have jobs. They can no longer afford to go to restaurants, and therefore the restaurant loses a certain percentage of its population that would use it. And so there's going to be an end game eventually where you can't get rid of this humans that easily because you destroy the economy. So there's really a lot of these questions are fed by the fear that they generated from news reports that they've read, that type of thing. And you just kind of have to try and find a way to bring some reality to it.
All right, thank you. I know we are a little bit over time at this point. So I think that is all the questions that we've got right now. So I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to conclude us for the day.
Thank you, Ryan. I want to thank all our presenters, Emily Wieshuber, Mark Daniel, Jessica Rodriguez, and Sarah Lambden. Thank you to everyone for coming, and keep an eye out for the recording in the next few days. Please go to laconia.net to find other great programs. I think there's 4 coming up in November, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much to everyone.